Hello and welcome to the first of a multi-part series analyzing Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. I will be playing through the entire game and commenting on whatever I deem important or interesting. Though the occasional personal input or anecdote is possible, the goal of this analysis is to be objective, to go beyond how I personally feel about Sekiro and instead try to understand it and assess its strengths and weaknesses from a neutral position. This project will take a long time to finish and the end result will be multiple hours long, so I will be dividing it into smaller thematic segments. This will hopefully ease up the viewing for those who wish to watch a specific part of the analysis and will keep my anxiety at bay by not keeping the channel completely empty for several weeks. The plan is to upload one part per week, and then finally upload the whole thing for the extreme enthusiasts among you that want to fall asleep to someone talking about Sekiro. If that gets you excited, please like this video and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when the next parts are uploaded.
Master swordsman Ashina staged a bloody coup and wrested control of the land.
The opening cutscene sets the tone straight away. This isn't going to be an epic fantasy adventure. There was a bloody war. The clan of Ashina came out on top thanks in large part to Master Swordsman, dare I say a sword saint, Ashina. Now, 2 decades later, Ashina is on the verge of another war, one they aren't favored to win. There's your world setup. We are shinobi, bound by a code of obedience to our adoptive father and to our master, in that order. Our father and master have both gone missing, and we are weak and weaponless, having failed to protect our master. There's your character setup and motivation. While we don't get a lot of information up front, what we do get is all crucial to how Sekiro unfolds. From Ashina's constant struggle to maintain a grip over its land, right down to our one major choice in the game. I suppose this is a good moment to confess my admiration for Matthew Matosis. We do seem to share a common love for going in the exact opposite direction of where the developers are pointing us at. In Demon's Souls, you collect your first item thanks to your curiosity. We're not as lavishly rewarded in Sekiro, but you do see an item up above, meaning this area will see more action in the future. More importantly, you learn that your character can swim. That's the exact same sensation GTA San Andreas players felt some 15 years earlier. Just wait till you find out you can also jump in this game. These early introductions are more important than they might appear. We couldn't do those things in prior FromSoft releases, so the devs are already telling us that this won't be Dark Souls in Japan, but its own separate thing. Useful information for when we get to the combat. One odd tutorial decision is the missed opportunity to introduce eavesdropping early on. That's one of the more underutilized mechanics in Sekiro, and the first misstep happens within the first minute of gameplay. An eavesdrop prompt and the tutorial message here could have inspired more players to discover a certain mini-boss's weakness to fire and save them a ton of frustration. Many criticize Sekiro's stealth system as being rudimentary at best and completely worthless at worst, but I think this assessment comes from a place of misunderstanding developer intent. From Software never set off to develop a game that can be beaten entirely by sneaking around. It's, for better or worse, not part of the studio's public image. I am actually surprised by how effective stealth can be in many instances, including a sizable portion of mini-boss encounters. We use this exact same route to sneak behind one of the toughest enemies in the game later on, for example. Meeting Lord Kuro early on is a smart narrative choice. Not that longtime fans wouldn't slice and dice their way through the game regardless, but having a face and a seemingly kind personality to fight for, instead of a faceless, voiceless master, is a proven method of increasing player engagement with the story. Kuro also gives us our primary weapon and healing item for the duration of the game, making him useful mechanically as well as narratively. After another case of careful exploration paying off, and with our healing gourd and life gem, pellet, in our pocket, away we go. Pellets are limited to 3 at a time, so it's not nearly the same, but I couldn't cut this joke from the script for some reason. Now that I said it, I'm not sure it was worth it, but it's here to stay anyway, so... laugh? The rest of the tutorial is 101 kind of stuff. We can take out the first couple of enemies by simply attacking. A tutorial message encourages us to deflect the next enemy to melt his posture in a split second. We can go for a stealth kill on the soldier we passed by on our way to Kuro, then we are met by a weak mob that teaches us to mind our surroundings, because this isn't Dark Souls and we can't iframe our way through 5 sword swings simultaneously. Lastly, we face our first mini-boss, the leader Shigenori Yamauchi. He isn't so much a boss as he is a gentle encouragement before the crushing blow we're going to receive by Genichiro in a minute. Yamauchi is used to introduce multiple health bars, but I'd like to think that FromSoft gave him a mini-boss status to make the player feel a little better with themselves in the early minutes of what will likely be a grueling first playthrough. As much as everyone memes on Soldier of Godric, I believe he serves a similar purpose in Elden Ring. A confidence-boosting boss to cheer you up before the game starts punching you in the balls. On that note, I'd be grateful if you ignore that I almost embarrassingly died here. I was a bit rusty. Fun tidbit. You can climb back up if you happen to clumsily fall down while trying to reach Genichiro. It had never happened to me before, and I was relieved to see FromSoft took even the most drunken shinobi into consideration here. And people say these games are for tryhards. We get back together with Lord Kuro and prepare to ride into the sunset when we get interrupted by Genichiro Ashina, Arm Cutter Supreme. This is one of those you must die here encounters that occasionally pop up in From Software games. Since we lose our left upper limb regardless of winning or losing the battle, I want to talk about familiarity for a moment and how it pertains to difficulty in these games. If you've been in this fandom long enough, you've certainly heard that the hardest From Software game is your first. That's not unique to the studio at all. Any game, barring self-imposed challenges, will become easier as you replay it. Genichiro Ashina is an ideal example to showcase this theory. I would never believe it if someone told me they played Sekiro with zero prior knowledge and defeated Genichiro here on their first playthrough. New combat system, next to no healing, pitiful damage, always a couple hits away from death, and a completely unknown enemy moveset are a recipe for dying within 10 seconds. The first time, that is. By the time you finally take the Sword Saint's head, you'd have fought Genichiro so many times that he'd be about as hard as leader Shigenori Yamauchi. Familiarity is the most powerful buff you can give yourself in Sekiro, and you don't need to do anything besides swing your katana to do it. After losing a quarter of our limbs, we are greeted by the worst boss in the game, who gives us a fancy new arm for Christmas. The shinobi prosthetic used to belong to the sculptor, who also lost his left arm to a member of the Ashina clan. A worrying trend for shinobi everywhere. Since he no longer has any use for it, we get to enjoy the best feature in any game ever, the grappling hook. We meet our level up lady here as well. Except we won't be leveling up ourselves, just our healing item. Lady Emma tends to move around the world at various points of the story, and we do get locked out of portions of the map not once but twice, which may be why the devs only assigned her this one upgrade and allowed the player to do everything else at Sculptor's Idols.
My master gave explicit orders.
This player-friendly philosophy is also used for prosthetic upgrades after the sculptor goes on his journey to become the worst boss, and through the item box behind the undead samurai that gives us access to items we would have missed otherwise. The undead samurai himself is here to help us get used to Sekiro's combat in a safe environment. It appears the devs knew a lot of returning players would insist on playing the game like Dark Souls, and went to lengths to instill that doing so would lead to a world of hurt. We will be exiting the hub and entering the first true level of the game now. I say that, but the Ashina Outskirts are mostly an extension of the tutorial. We learn how to use the grappling hook to our positional advantage, we collect our first loot, XP and Sen, we are introduced to spirit emblems and skills, we collect our first prosthetic tool, and if you're playing for the first time, most certainly you'll also find out about Unseen Aid. Besides ninjutsu and the very basic tutorial leading to the Dilapidated Temple, every core mechanic is encountered or explained for the first time in the Ashina Outskirts. Since we will be clearing basic soldier mobs for the next few minutes, we might as well talk about some of the aforementioned mechanics. We can't exit the Dilapidated Temple without the grappling hook, a setup for our first choice in the game seconds later. Should you go up or down from the first sculptor's idol? Dropping down means taking on the enemies in the area head on, while going up will allow you to mostly stealth your way through. This sort of level design is present throughout Sekiro, even allowing you to take off health bars from mini-bosses by going above or around them, often with the help of the grappling hook. It's one of those diegetic difficulty sliders From Software is famous for, but in this case it's also a choice of playstyles. Someone who loves stealth like me will constantly look for these backstab opportunities. Someone who's here strictly for the action might intentionally choose to kick down the front door. Player freedom is one of very few things most gamers can agree is objectively good, and we get a lot of it in Sekiro, including the freedom to bugger off in a split second from nearly all non-boss encounters. Collecting loot from fallen enemies is done semi-automatically, but that's not the biggest quality of life change on Sekiro's plate. That honor goes to the pause menu. The ability to pause in what many consider the hardest From Software game kind of puts the nail in the coffin of the argument that pausing would kill the intensity of these games. Pausing isn't for casuals, after all. Though, funnily enough, I'd gotten so used to it not being an option that I don't think I ever paused once during combat on my first playthrough. We find our first prosthetic tool, the loaded shuriken, just before the first proper mini-boss. These gadgets are as close as we get to magic in Sekiro. Unfortunately, there are multiple factors that diminish their impact, on blind playthroughs especially. Most of the tools aren't introduced very well, suffering from poor placement, and on one particularly egregious occasion, a misleading eavesdrop that could turn one of the two unorthodox bosses in the game into a very frustrating encounter. The shuriken, for example, can be very useful against Lady Butterfly, but by the time you reach her, you'd be a couple hours and a few mini-bosses away from the moment you found this tool. Hand-holding is one thing, poor teaching is another. General Naomori Kawarada, the upcoming mini-boss, could have been a nimbler enemy that took to the air often to show us how impactful prosthetic tools can be in the right circumstances, but he isn't. The other and much bigger problem with prosthetic tools comes in the form of spirit emblems, a limited, finite resource you need in order to use your tools. Sekiro is finely tuned for the most part and arguably has the least amount of clear-cut bullshit out of all FromSoft games, but when it messes up, it does it with grandeur. Spirit emblems are one of two Sekiro mechanics I consider to be straight up anti-fun. You can have up to 999 in your inventory, but only 15 in your equipment. You can acquire skills to increase that number, but each skill only gives you one extra emblem. You can purchase spirit emblems at sculptor's idols, but their price increases as you reach certain story beats. From Software does a lot of things right, but it tends to get caught on its own supply at times. Which other studio would give you a fun combat system to play around with and then lock it behind the use of finite items, discouraging experimentation in the process? And for what? A fear that someone will throw shurikens at Ashina until he concedes out of sheer boredom? Prosthetic tools aren't nearly powerful enough to warrant such balancing diligence. Their placement around the world, lack of proper teaching, and spirit emblem cost only serve to push players away and toward what they know is equally effective all the time: swinging their katana. It's a shame too, as one late game boss shows us, playing like a true shinobi and using all the tricks in our bag can be a lot of fun. While General Kawarada fails in teaching us to use prosthetic tools, he does reinforce the importance of exploring our surroundings and always looking for the higher ground if you want to make our life easier. We also get to face a perilous attack for the first time. These can be sweeps, thrusts or grabs, each requiring a different reaction to avoid. Sweeps are evaded by jumping, thrusts by parrying or dodging, and grabs by praying and running the hell away. Throwing too much at the player at once is never a good idea, and the devs wisely restricted Kawarada to a single sweep, the perilous attack easiest to deal with. He is otherwise a slightly beefed up version of the soldiers we fought to get here. The difference is that the general takes more than 2 swings to kill, and we must face him one-on-one if we want the rewards for beating him and, play the game. Stealth can take you a long way in Sekiro, but it can't take you all the way. You will have to fight. I consider this next area to be the actual end of the tutorial. We learned about stealth, we learned how to fight. Now we have to put it all together to clear the dozen or so enemies here. One-on-one combat is Sekiro's bread and butter, so it's easy to criticize crowd control sections like this one. I won't do that though. With rare exceptions, these encounters are very well balanced around Wolf's skillset, either allowing for a few stealth kills to lower enemy numbers, an easy escape route if you get cornered, or later on using ninjutsu to even the numbers or regain stealth for multiple death blows. Mob enemies also tend to go down in 2 or 3 hits at most, which combined with the iframes during death blow animations means we can charge them down rather easily. Being aware is the name of the game, regardless if you're facing a single foe or several of them. Of course, my greed causes me to die to the one big guy here. I want to stress that he was a hit away from death himself, will be important in a second. Our first death means we get to resurrect for the first time.
Loyal wolf, take my blood and live again.
Lord Kuro's voice calls to us from the black screen and we are back in action. Resurrection is the standout mechanic of Sekiro. It's even in the title, Shadows Die Twice. Forgive me for being too partial here, but I love it. And I think it should be worked into every Souls-like. I consider facing the unknown to be by far the most difficult aspect in these games, hence my familiarity speech from earlier. Getting surprised by a new attack you haven't seen before, an ambush, a status effect you're unprepared for, or by your own greed, those are what's killing you a vast majority of the time, not necessarily a lack of skill. All of that is immeasurably easier to swallow when you get the chance to make amends immediately. The unfortunate side effect to Resurrection is Unseen Aid, the second anti-fun measure From Software threw into the mix. Sorry to break it to any old school RPG fans, but random chance dice rolls do not measure well on the scales of objectivity, and that's exactly what Unseen Aid is. A random shot at keeping all your savings, or losing half your XP and Sen forever, with no option to get it back. Adding insult to injury, you only start with a 30% chance of keeping your stuff. The odds get progressively worse as you die, and you don't even get a guaranteed aid after your first death to at least create the illusion that this mechanic isn't completely busted.
You, Inosuke? My
I said that the big guy being one hit away from death will be important, and I never lie. Ever.
I am not your son.
This anecdote can be argued over like any other, of course, but I hope I'm not being too extravagant by claiming that miscalculating an enemy's posture break by a single hit can be called a minor mistake bordering on bad luck, or in proper gaming terms, kind of bullshit. These moments can be quite common in From Software titles. It's a mixture of design, player mentality, honest mistakes, unfortunate timing, and sheer bad luck. But whatever the reasons, it does happen. That's a fact. It happened to me here, but I have my resurrection, so it's all good. Except it isn't, because I get gangbanged by black cocks that caused me to panic, and bam, I'm dead just like that. In Demon's Souls, Dark Souls, Bloodborne and Elden Ring, that's not the end of the world. I can make my way back, get revenge over the cocky pricks and pick up my stuff. Not in Sekiro. Here I pray to the lottery gods with odds that are at best 30%. I doubt there's a single person outside of From Software's headquarters that prefers this system to the classic Souls formula of losing everything upon death, but being able to recover it before dying again. Opinions aren't objective and all that, but there are these rare cosmic alignments where an opinion is elevated to the status of a fact. Praying that the dice fall on the right number doesn't hold the same mechanical value as fighting your way back to your lost goods. There are still legitimate arguments against keeping the old system as is. If nothing changed from Souls, with Resurrection we practically have 3 chances to save our XP and Sen. Wolf also runs faster and jumps higher, or at all really, so simply brute forcing our way to our dropped XP would admittedly be child's play. A new system was needed, but this isn't it. My suggestion would have been to have our lost XP tied to the enemy that killed us, so we have to kill it in return to get it all back, or even have us clear the whole area when we died. That way we couldn't sneak behind that one enemy for a quick death blow. Anything other than a passive gamble would have been better. I'd be interested to hear your suggestions for a new recovery system in Sekiro. Who knows, someone might add it with a mod, or we could see it in Sekiro 2 maybe. You can start writing your ideas down in the comments right now, because we've acquired the young lord's bell charm from the old lady. With it we'll be making a trip down false memory lane into the Hirata estate. But that's a journey for another video. I hope to see you there. Make sure to like and subscribe so you get notified when part 2 comes out.
The bell's chime will stir your thoughts.